all through eternity. Beauty unveils his exquisite form in the solitude of nothingness. He holds a mirror to his face and beholds his own beauty. He is the knower and the known, the seer and the seen. No eye but his own has ever looked upon this universe. His every quality finds an expression. Eternity becomes the verdant field of time and space. Love, the life-giving garden of this world. Every branch and leaf and fruit reveals an aspect of his perfection. The cypress gives hint of his majesty. The rose gives tidings of his beauty. Whenever beauty looks, love is also there. Whenever beauty shows a rosy cheek, love lights her fire from that flame. When beauty dwells in the dark folds of night, love comes and finds a heart entangled in tresses. Beauty and love are as body and soul. Beauty is the mine. Love is the diamond. They have together since the beginning of time, side by side, step by step. I swear, since seeing your face, the whole world is fraud and fantasy. The garden is bewildered as to what is leaf or blossom. The distracted birds can't distinguish the birdseed from the snare. A house of love with no limits. A presence more beautiful than Venus or the moon. A beauty whose image fills the mirror of the heart. In today's day and age, there has never been a stronger desire for beauty and love. We're chasing after these things all the time, and it's only becoming more and more pronounced with all the images we see on our phone, all the dating apps we have access to, and so on and so on. Simply put, we all gravitate toward physical beauty, and we all crave to be in love. What we don't realize, however, is that true beauty and love can't be found in other people. It can only be found in God. When we're captivated by someone's beauty or swept off our feet by love, what we're really encountering is a mere reflection of God. And this is where Rumi enters the stage. While his name may be synonymous with perhaps the most beautiful love poetry out there, most people don't realize that a lot of Rumi's poems aren't simply about the interplay of human emotions. Instead, they're about the profound connection with the divine. They're about one's deep and intimate love for God. Now, don't get me wrong here. I'm by no means suggesting that our connections with people are somehow insignificant or lacking value in any way. Far from it. Rather, the magic lies in recognizing that these connections, whether romantic or friendly, are actually mirrors reflecting the love of the Creator. Just imagine for a moment gazing into a mirror and admiring your reflection. You see, you're not really admiring the reflection itself. What you're admiring is the person or source creating that reflection. In a similar vein, when we're touched by the beauty and love we encounter in our lives, we're essentially touched by the radiance of God. Without the divine presence, we simply would not even have the capacity to perceive beauty or experience love in the first place. Our ability to appreciate these qualities stems from our deep connection with the divine source. And so it is with this perspective that we must approach a poem like this. When Rumi is expressing his feelings in this poem, he's not really falling head over heels for a beautiful man or woman. He's falling head over heels for divinity itself. His love for God is so profound that he has lost all sense of who he is and has become absorbed in the divine presence. Now, you might be wondering, can we really use terms like union or falling in love when talking about our relationship with God? You know, it seems a little bit unusual, but Rumi believes the answer is yes, and he often uses these words to capture the ecstasy he's feeling when thinking about or connecting with the divine. This form of love is the highest form of love there is, and unlike fleeting romantic interests or infatuations, it has no beginning or end. It is neither selfish nor conditional. This is because our love for God, and in turn God's love for us, is timeless, selfless, and unconditional. When we truly connect with God from the bottom of our heart, we realize what a beautiful love this is, and why Rumi was able to write such impassioned poetry that evoked his deep connection with the divine. So now that we have this background in place, and we have a little bit of a sense of the context Rumi wrote it in, let's take a closer look at this poem and find some more examples and explanations of this pure love. A love that has no limits, and a beauty that fills the mirror of the heart. Rumi was not the only Sufi poet to try to describe God's attributes and appearances although he is certainly perhaps the most famous and even the most controversial. In fact, while Rumi is adored by countless people across the globe, of different faiths and backgrounds, there are some religious extremists out there who criticize and even attack his attempts to portray God. Indeed, while no one can describe God using words or concepts like face, beauty, and image, or even with pronouns like he or she, Rumi and many other Sufi poets took great liberty in using such language to paint a picture that would resonate with their audience, that would resonate with their souls rather than their minds. Instead of some abstract and distant figure to be feared, God is now an approachable and beautiful entity to be loved and admired. And so, when we read the opening line here of beauty unveiling its exquisite form, we shouldn't take it to mean that God has a certain hair color, or a certain skin type or smile. The beauty Rumi evokes cannot be seen with the physical eyes. It's a vision of the heart and soul. In fact, Rumi elaborates just as much when he says that this beauty can only be found in the solitude of nothingness. Paradoxically, describing this beauty transforms it into something. Therefore, it's not God anymore. The term nothingness may sound a bit counterintuitive and even blasphemous at first when we're trying to describe God. But let's try to explore it here for a minute. Nothing equals no thing. That is, God is nothing because God is no thing. God escapes human thoughts and concepts, and so we cannot see the divine using our mind or the typical five senses that we use to navigate and make sense of the world. God purposefully is invisible to the naked eye because we have to learn to cultivate another kind of eye. We must develop a new way of seeing, a new way of vision. In this busy world and life we are living, we are constantly bombarded by different thoughts and perceptions. We never really see things as they truly are. And similarly, we never see God as God truly is. We are always trying to paint an image of God, always trying to describe the divine as this and that. However, God lives wherever nothingness resides. And so you may be wondering, where exactly is this place where there is nothing at all? Well, I'll tell you. It's the place, or more accurately, the state of being, where you are no longer consumed by your thoughts. When you no longer see the world through your mind's eye, you have entered a state of nothingness. And the funny or ironic thing about this nothingness is that it can technically exist everywhere. Everywhere that we are able to transcend our mind to perceive it. So, I'll give you an easy example here. Imagine two people sitting across a peaceful lake. One is dwelling on a recent breakup and the thought of never finding love again. I'm sure probably some of us can relate to that. The other person, however, is not thinking at all and is simply absorbed by the lake's tranquil water. You see, both have the ability to see God in that moment, but only the latter can truly see God because he is not focused on seeing himself. He is not focused on the story his mind or ego creates. And herein lies an important truth. When you are so focused on seeing yourself, you cannot see God. But when you are focused on seeing God, you see deeper than you have ever seen before. You no longer just look at things anymore with indifference or familiarity. Instead, you become immersed in them, and you find a connection with them that is deeper than anything your mind can ever tell you. This is how we can see God's beauty everywhere. In a mountain, a person, a leaf, or even a speck of sand. Now you might be saying, but I actually want to see God for myself, like with my own two eyes. Some people even boldly say, I'll believe God when I can see God. In other words, I'll believe it when I see it. But as satisfying as this may sound, to actually see God with our own two eyes, the truth is that God's image, if we can even call it that, is far too great for us to comprehend. We cannot see God directly, because doing so would require completely polishing the mirror of our heart to see the divine reflection. Now, there's no doubt some of us have made tremendous progress in polishing our mirrors, but the vast majority of us still have a long way to go to clear up all the dirt, the dust, and the impurities clouding our mirror. In other words, clouding our heart. In fact, even prophets and those considered extremely close to God have found it impossible to try to gain a physical glimpse of the divine's true image. In the Quran, for example, which Rumi interpreted and incorporated a lot into his poetry, we come across the story of Moses who encounters God in the mountains. This story is also mentioned with some variation in the Bible. Moses not only desired to know more about God, but he also asked the divine to reveal himself. Now God replied that Moses could never see him, but directed him to look at the mountain, and if the mountain remained firmly in place, then Moses will have effectively had a glimpse of God. But here's the fun part. As soon as Moses looked, God unveiled the light of his divine beauty, which caused the mountain to collapse. Upon seeing the mountain become dust, Moses just fainted. And when he actually regained consciousness, he realized what happened, and he asked God for forgiveness, learning the true nature of God's beauty and image. I share this story not to get lost into the religious details or accounts of this famous exchange, but rather to convey what Rumi is also trying to convey, in that God's beauty and image is beyond our understanding. No matter how hard we try, we can never see God in the traditional meaning of sight. But if we actually dig deeper, we can see God in every second and every corner of our life. This is what Rumi means when he says, his every quality finds an expression. Even though God is not a man or woman, in the way many of us might imagine, we still find the Creator's qualities in this world. When we see someone performing a random act of kindness, guess what we see? We see God's compassion. When we see someone giving an encouraging pep talk, what we're really seeing is God's love and grace. You see, God's presence is everywhere and inside everyone. But we just have to empty ourselves of all the barriers and obstacles that prevent us from seeing this presence. We have to constantly work on ourselves to purify all the unconscious thoughts, beliefs, and behaviors that make us unaware, that make us unconscious. If we do so, then we not only see God, but we see through God. We see through God's eyes. In other words, there is a point on our spiritual journey where we no longer perceive a separation from God. Instead, we perceive the all-encompassing oneness that is the divine itself. This is the highest form of spiritual understanding and self-realization. When we no longer see ourselves as separate from God, but rather as a part of God. Rumi captures this when he says that no eye but his own has ever looked upon this universe. That is, we think we are the ones seeing, but it is actually God seeing. Our eyes and mind belong not to us, but rather to God. And when we truly internalize this, we experience an incredible shift in our consciousness. We no longer see with the mind-made lens of I or me and all the personal baggage it comes with. We see with the lens and vision of God. They say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but in truth, beauty is in the eye of God. Whatever God sees radiates beauty, because in some way it is also a reflection of God. So the next time we see a beautiful person, painting, or even a landscape, we can certainly admire it for its own unique qualities. However, our admiration shouldn't just stop there, because there is only one source of beauty, from which everything else derives its beauty, and that is, of course, God alone. And the interesting thing is that it's not just beauty that makes God so amazing. It's also love as well. A love that can light the whole world, and most importantly, light our own hearts. For all the different ways that we can describe and imagine love, perhaps none is as deep or inspirational as how Rumi describes both in this poem. Love is not only something we crave as humans, Rumi says. It is the life-giving garden of this world. What a beautiful analogy that is. In truth, love is actually the very source of life, and I don't mean this in a strictly metaphorical way. God is the one responsible for all of life, but if God did not have love for humanity, we would not even exist at all. Therefore, it is love, and specifically God's love, that is the sole reason why you and I are here today. God's love is like a beautiful and endless garden that just keeps giving life to everything in it. It's a garden where vibrant plants thrive, tranquil waters flow, and gentle creatures find solace. Now, of course, this is all beautifully poetic and symbolic, but you get the picture here. Every moment, person, and thing in life can all be traced back to the moment when God's love created existence. And so, when we look at love in our daily life, we need to hold it in the same regard that God does. We need to love on a much, much deeper level than we have previously been doing. For example, loving our parents doesn't just mean loving the people who care for us. It means loving the divine presence in them that nurtured us from absolutely nothing. Loving our soulmate doesn't just mean loving the man or woman who makes us happy. It really means loving the divine essence in them that completes and gives meaning to our union. Even loving our pet or a piece of art or music is not what we perceive it to be, but rather a reflection of God's love. Unfortunately, though, the word love has been severely distorted and misused. Often, when we talk about love, we're not talking about the pure love through which God created us. Instead, we're confusing it with lust, pleasure, and desire, things that are the opposite of true love. We often chase after people and things, believing they will bring us joy, only to find that they bring us pain and disillusionment. And then we're just left confused as to why love can be so painful and why it hurts so deeply. Well, the truth is that love never hurts. Love only heals. True love, that is. A love that is selfless, pure, and unconditional. So ask yourself, how many loves are like that in the world today? Unfortunately, not too many. We have forgotten the real meaning of love, seeking it in all the wrong places and wasting much precious time and energy. Now, this doesn't mean that we should abandon the pursuit of love in human relationships or experiences. That would certainly not be the general meaning here. It just means that we need to recognize God as the base or foundation of all types of love. When we understand this kind of love, then we can understand and experience all forms of love. When we see the cypress tree and perceive God, then we will experience love. When we see the rose and perceive God, then we will experience love. Not because the person or thing we love is all of a sudden different, but rather because our heart is now different. Our heart becomes more receptive to giving and receiving this love, just as God spreads this love without hesitation throughout the entire world. And when you combine love and beauty together, you arrive at the pure essence of God. You arrive at the pure essence of yourself. Rumi has some beautiful imagery here about the ways love and beauty are deeply connected. And I absolutely love some of the words he uses here. For example, when he compares love and beauty to the body and the soul, you can appreciate the sacred connection between the two. Or even better, when he compares them to the mine and diamond, you can really start to see how they are related to one another. Now, on the one hand, the diamond is obviously more precious than the mine. One can spend days digging inside the mine, before finding the object of their desire. But if you think about it, one can't find the diamond unless they actually enter the mine. So you can argue that the mine is more precious than the diamond because it actually houses the treasure. But in truth, both have their beauty and importance. And even though we might cherish one thing over the other, in this case, the diamond probably, the reality is that one cannot exist without the other. True beauty cannot exist without love, and true love cannot exist without beauty. In this context, the beauty described here goes beyond what meets the eye. Because even though, for example, you might not find someone physically beautiful, they may just have a certain quality about them that you find beautiful. Now, this can be their character, their personality, or even their sense of humor. And what can draw you even more to them is if they have the ability to love freely and openly, to love without barriers, or as Rumi calls it, a house of love with no limits. What he means here is not an actual house, but our very own heart. Our heart is the house of love. Now, some of us have very torn down and depressing houses because we have filled our hearts with hate, pride, and envy, whereas others have very beautiful and welcoming houses because they have filled their hearts with nothing but love. They have filled it with a rare kind of beauty that only a few souls can fully appreciate. But now that we know the true meaning of love and beauty, how do we exactly apply this wisdom to our lives? You know, it's a wonderful poem, but how do we translate its concepts into real and meaningful action? This is really the heart of the matter, pun intended. Because while I agree that this is a beautiful poem that we can all read and enjoy, it also holds a more profound message, an ultimate revelation that can be found at the very end of the poem. And as we approach the end of this poem, we actually start to encounter a significant shift in focus. Here, Rumi is no longer describing the interplay of beauty and love, but is instead speaking directly to God. This shift signals a pivotal moment because it encapsulates the essence of Rumi's spiritual message. Now that we have come to understand the true essence of beauty and love, what then becomes of the world around us? Well, in Rumi's eyes, the whole world is fraud and fantasy. In other words, this world is an illusion when we discover the beauty of God's face, when we discover the beauty of God's love. For the lucky soul who manages to arrive at this point in their spiritual journey, the world is no longer of concern to them. They are no longer concerned about making money, finding a partner, or being loved and recognized by others, because these are all temporary things of this world. They remain behind as we one day depart from our physical bodies. However, our connection with God is something we definitely take on this journey beyond life. If you think about it, it's really the only thing we can take when we leave this world. Everything else, including our career, possessions, loved ones, and even our own bodies, gets left behind. The only thing that remains is our soul, the same soul with which we entered this world. And this is the deeper meaning of this line. God has given us a simple purpose in life, to return back home to Him. But God has also placed a million distractions in this world that trip us up at every second and make us forget the sacred purpose. These distractions make us selfish, greedy, sad, and hopeless as we struggle to understand the real meaning of life. We think the key to a happy and peaceful life is in life itself, when in truth it is beyond life. It is beyond anything we can gain or acquire in this world. If we take life too seriously to begin with, we can't appreciate and accept the fact that we will one day leave it all behind. And that is why God places all these distractions and obstacles in our life in the first place. It's because God wants us to awaken. He wants us to see beyond the world's fleeting facade. You know, many of us sometimes question why God brings us pain, why God gives us challenges and difficulties. But these are all just secret forms of love. We might complain why we became sick, why we lost our job, or why our heart was broken, not knowing that within each of these challenges lies an incredible opportunity to open our eyes. It is through these forms of love that God wants us to awaken and look beyond this superficial and temporary world. But before we can actually awaken, we get distracted by every single thing. We are like the birds, Rumi says, that can't distinguish the birdseed from the actual snare itself. We think something is like the birdseed that will give us nourishment, give us happiness and fulfillment, only for it to be a snare that traps us and makes us suffer. Now, while this world is beautiful and important in its own way, it is ultimately a fantasy. When we understand this, we come to know our true purpose in life, which is to return back home to God, to return to a house of love with no limits, a presence more beautiful than Venus or the moon, and a beauty whose image fills the mirror of the heart. If returning to God is our life's purpose, then cleaning our heart is the pathway to help us get there. Only through the heart can we find our way back home. But in order to actually do so, we must first reacquaint ourselves with the heart, and then constantly work on removing all the blemishes and impurities that have covered this beauty. This requires us to turn away from our mind, the very mind or ego that we have unconsciously followed for so many years, only to our own misery and dissatisfaction. But when we reconnect with our heart, we find our life's true purpose and the real source of our happiness, deep and everlasting connection with the divine. This is what it means to unveil the mirror of the heart. The beauty of love is already woven into the very fabric of our being. All we need to do now is remove every single one of those barriers that have stood in the way of us seeing this image in our mirror. As the famous Rumi quote goes, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. Love is already present everywhere around and inside you, but now is the time to bring it to the surface and to let it be the physical embodiment of who you really are. If you manage to do this, then you will experience the same joy, passion, and ecstasy Rumi did, or who knows, perhaps even more. So I hope you enjoyed this beautiful and incredibly rich poem that has so much to offer, no matter how many times you read and revisit it. No, at first glance, it might seem like just any other love poem, but trust me, there is a lot of wisdom here. Wisdom that has the potential to transform your life. To truly understand this poem and its deeper meaning is to not only read what Rumi wrote about, but to also experience what he experienced during his lifetime. And that is a deep and powerful connection with God. So long as you keep nurturing this connection, it will serve you in all facets of your life, offering guidance and solace along your journey. So I hope you always remember and live by these words, and that you keep polishing this very special mirror of yours, this special heart of yours. If you enjoyed this video, please take a moment to drop a like and share your thoughts and insights. I always enjoy hearing what your perspective is on these poems, and more importantly, how we can apply the wisdom to our own life. It's always great to hear different perspectives and then to engage in a dialogue that can help all of us. Don't forget also to check out the rest of the channel for similar videos like this one, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so that you can receive access to all the newest videos as they come out. Remember, you are not alone on this journey. By clicking that subscribe button, you become a part of this growing global community of seekers who are on the same journey as you are, who are going through the same difficulties and challenges that you are. So whenever you have a question or you want to share an experience or insight, know that you can do so openly and freely without any judgment. And on that note, I hope that these teachings help guide and inspire you on your own unique path. Keep polishing your mirror until all you see is God and no one else.